Welcome back, America. This is Betsy McCoy filling in for Steve Malzberg, and with me is John Fund, Newsmax contributor and National Review columnist. And we've just been talking about race relations in America. And now, of course, what's on everyone's mind is Eric Holder's Justice Department fair to whites? Is it fair to cops?
I don't think it's fair to America, because the basis of the Justice Department has to be its respect for the rule of law. At the heart of the rule of law is the notion that everyone, as much as possible, is treated equally without fear or favor. Now, every administration has the right to enforce certain laws more than others, but they have priorities. But Eric Holder has basically swept all of that aside in the interests of what I consider as a race-based ideology. Give you a perfect example. You know, you're supposed to go after your friends as well as your foes. In 2009, we had the new Black Panther case. This was a case of people in military-style uniform with weapons intimidating voters at a polling place in Philadelphia. Bartle Bull, who was Robert Kennedy's campaign manager in New York, who was a civil rights worker in Mississippi in the 1960s, was there. He witnessed this. He said, "I've never seen a case of more blatant intimidation of voters." And they were indicted by the Bush administration just before they left office. The case had effectively been won. The Black Panthers didn't even show up at the first court hearings. Eric Holder basically removed the charges, left one guy with a slap on the wrist, which was meaningless, and they effectively got off. And lo and behold, just last fall, we saw the new Black Panther Party emerge, trying to lead demonstrations in Ferguson and trying to incite violence in Ferguson. So this is a case of bad behavior that was let go, and now the bad behavior is returned. You go on and on and on, and there are more and more examples.
And then let's look at the other side. How about the Seattle Police Department?
The Seattle Police Department is one of 15 police departments around the country that are being subjected to the microscope of disparate impact. Disparate impact says, even though low-income neighborhoods, minority neighborhoods may have more crime, even though minorities commit more crime, and by the way, most of it against other minority members, even though this happens, this is not something that can be tolerated because it affects the population disproportionately in the number of criminals you arrest. So if you have a criminal population that is disproportionately minority, somehow that means the Justice Department should have the right to step into the local police force and fix it. That means ordering reforms, ordering changes, ordering them not to do certain things, ordering them to change their rules of force. My brother was the deputy chief of police in Tucson for over 20 years. This is madness to micromanage police departments. If there are bad apples in the police department, if there's scandals, if there's abuse, you prosecute it. But you don't have the Justice Department basically sue the Seattle Police Department into changing all of its procedures because crime in Seattle is going through the roof.
Now, Seattle cops are, I've heard, there's some sort of work stoppage going on. Now we see that in New York. Do people who live in cities all across the country have to worry that the cops are going to stop making arrests?
Well, first of all, I don't think the cops should stop making arrests. I think in New York they're going too far in stopping making arrests because they're even doing it for petty crimes. In Seattle, I don't think there's a work stoppage. I think that the new rules have emboldened the criminals to commit more crimes, which is really bad because that means you can't necessarily stop it simply by having more police on the street if the police are handcuffed. So this, I think, is a completely irrational policy. It goes to the fire departments, too. In New York City, Betsy, Eric Holder demanded that the New York City Fire Department hire people who had flunked over 80% of the questions on their test.
So frightening.
In other words, it's one thing to want diversity. It's one thing to want a broad net cast for applicants. But if you're forcing police departments to hire unqualified applicants, that's going to hurt everyone.
That's right. It's going to put us all at risk.
Absolutely.
What don't we know about Al Sharpton? What haven't we heard yet? He's been in the news so much over the years, from tax evasion to the Tawana Brawley hoax to rabble rising all around the country. What else don't we know about Al Sharpton?
Well, Al Sharpton claims to not have any assets. Astonishingly, he has given testimony in court and in depositions in which people whom he owes money to, including the U.S. government, have asked him, well, why don't you sell your assets to pay your bills? And he says, well, I don't own anything. Well, what about the suit you wear? Well, I borrowed it from someone.
How about yours, John?
Well, it may not be very good, but I did. It is mine.
But
and the same thing with his house. He says, I just stay with friends. I don't own any real estate. I don't have any real estate.
It's hard to believe that the President of the United States would consort with somebody like that.
Well, we've had people who did consort with people like that in the past, and it only came out, I think, later after they'd left office. The disturbing thing here is this is happening while Obama is president and while people should be complaining, and they're not. Al Sharpton is just given a pass, and frankly, he's given a pass because of who he is and what he purports to represent. And by the way, once again, no one elected him. President Obama says he's the leader of the
So
civil rights
shocking.
movement, but very few other people
You got to
do.
come back soon.
Sure.
You've got so much to tell us. Up next, the associate editor for hotair.com, Noah Rothman. This is Betsy McCoy, standing in for Steve Malzberg. Stay with us.